none of which has actually seen the footprint of the government in power today. Nor, I must say, Mr. Chairman, has it seen with respect to the Liberal government in power prior to that in 1993. Housing is a very serious issue in certain parts of Nova Scotia, and I've already alluded to those particular areas of Nova Scotia: Antigonish, Yarmouth, Halifax metro area. There's a housing shortage, and I would so much say a housing crisis in the metropolitan area when we look at the number of dollars that are actually, I should say the number of people on a waiting list, Mr. Chairman, who are waiting for subsidized or public housing in this province, some 1,300 individuals. Mr. Chairman, the government says that it's going to unfold its plan around housing, and I was certainly hoping that there would be a great statement made with respect to the financial measures bill, that in fact there would be an identification of just exactly what this government's footprint is going to be around public housing. I've talked here and I've said, Mr. Chairman, about the money that goes into the Residential Rehabilitation Assistance Program, RAP. The money that goes in the Rehabilitation Assistance Program, RAP, as the acronym is usually spent before the money comes forward. And many of the people who are looking for emergency housing funding as well, in the event that their roof has suddenly taken a leak, or there's a need for an oil tank, or something of the nature with respect to a wheelchair ramp. Mr. Chairman, all these applicants who make application find themselves in a waiting list time after time after time, or find that the money is spent. And I have to tell you, Mr. Chairman, it's extremely disappointing to those individuals when in fact they find that money spent. Now, the $37.26 million that is supposed to be spent over the 5-year span, this government has actually not told us where that money is going to be spent, how it's going to be meted out. It tells us that it's going to unfold as it should. And I would assume that there will be some announcements probably this summer during the election campaign, as the government thinks it should. When it unfolds, they will certainly announce what housing projects they're going to do. I want to say again that there are many people out there in the community who are actively involved in homelessness, housing. They're involved in all housing needs, particularly around the needs for seniors housing, the need for persons with environmental illness housing. There's a need for persons with disabilities housing. There's a whole stock of housing needs that are required out there, Mr. Chairman, and yet this government has not been forthcoming with respect to where those dollars are going to be spent. Nor has this government stated that, in fact, Mr. Chairman, it would or it will give those talk to those individuals, those advocacy groups out there, whom in fact will be able to provide the input to government with respect to the needs that they see throughout the province. Particular needs for single-family homeowners. I've talked about that through the modest housing program, which some would benefit from, but have no idea or didn't know anything about it. Mr. Chairman, I've always believed that all segments of our society should be the recipient and the benefactor of a balanced budget. And if there are surpluses, we should all benefit from that surplus. Mr. Chairman, the unfortunate part of it is that not all Nova Scotians will benefit from that surplus. We all pay the price, regardless if we're on the lowest end of the economic scale to the highest end of the economic scale with respect to maybe varying degrees, but we all pay a price with respect to fiscal responsibility. Most times, Mr. Chairman, it is those on the lowest end of the scale who receive the brunt of government's balancings of budget. And that's consistent right across this province. What I'm saying, Mr. Chairman, is that if those dollars would have went into the pockets of those Nova Scotians whom in fact would have been able to better utilize those dollars, who would have been able to buy the clothing for their children, to spend that money on medication, to buy those new shoes, and those sorts of things would have been, those dollars would have been spent to better use. Talk to the Minister of Community Services with respect to reviewing his budget. The minister at least admitted that he is going to review the budget with respect to the amount of dollars that are put into the shelter component and the amount of dollars that are in personal needs. You know, in this province, I don't know if you're aware, but a person who is on social assistance receives $180 a month for personal needs. $180 a month for personal needs. That includes shaving, medication, whatever the case may be, food, anything that may come out of that. $180 a month simply just doesn't cut it, Mr. Chairman. It does not cut it at all. And many Nova Scotians out there know that, and they're related to individuals whom, in fact, are in those difficult situations. The same with the shelter component. It might very well be that the basic shelter allotments that are allotted through the department's policy manuals are okay in rural areas. It may very well be that some of those rural areas fit fine within that shelter allotment. But I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, that is not the case in the metro area. In the metro area, because of the low vacancy rate, landlords in this area can very well ask what the market will bear. And when they ask what the market will bear, Mr. Chairman, that in itself leaves no opportunity for those individuals on fixed and low incomes. Often they have to rent from landlords who are less than receptive to the particular needs of those individuals, who in some cases are classed as slum landlords and so on. And despite municipal governments trying to address or deal with those issues, and provincial governments, it just doesn't happen, Mr. Chairman. It just doesn't happen. And Mr. Chairman, what needs to be done is there needs to be a review with respect to that. I know in the city of Dartmouth, the former city of Dartmouth, I should say, Mr. Chairman, we recognized a problem with respect to the development of housing a long time ago. And I remember that we used to have in the former city of Dartmouth a housing coordinator, one that looked at the housing stock and see if it met the needs of the citizens of its municipality. And in 1993, there was a move for municipal governments as well as provincial governments and federal governments to get out of the housing business because they didn't know and the housing needs, and that it was best left up to the private sector, Mr. Chairman, and the private sector would develop the housing stock that would satisfy the needs of Nova Scotians. Well, that just didn't happen. Since 1993, although massive developments have taken place, the housing stock for the poorest of Nova Scotians have not changed and is not there. And so we can certainly do that. We can certainly bring in the private sector to develop the housing, but with a policy and a plan by the provincial government and how that's going to be done. There's also the money that comes down, the bag of money in which we know nothing about. There's a bag of money that comes down as a result of the federal government initially getting out of the housing department to maintain the existing housing stock that was formerly there, and particularly around cooperative housing. That, Mr. Chairman, hasn't changed, and the government has not set a plan or a direction on how it's using that money. We have asked the government how that money is spent, and the government has continued to stall or not provide that offer to us. Mr. Chairman, I want to say that there's also the issue around the casino and the casino smoking legislation. This government says that it is interested in the health of Nova Scotians, but yet this government chose to introduce a piece of legislation through the Financial Measures Bill that would allow it the option of opting in on 30 days. Now, I know that prior to 1998, when the new Municipal Government Act came into being, and that in fact it was an order of good government, prior to that, municipalities, I believe, could not draft bylaws or legislation that was in conflict with the provincial government's legislation. However, under the 1998 Municipal Government Act, the new Municipal Government Act, which brought forward the order of good government, it was going to allow the municipalities to be somewhat autonomous, to give them some powers of their own, to allow them to craft legislation or to craft bylaws, particularly that would be in the interest of its citizens, and that kind of thing would happen. And so what happened is that the Halifax Regional Municipality decided that that's the way it would go. It decided that it would craft a piece of legislation around a total ban of smoking in the Halifax Regional Municipality, in public places and in private and in workplaces as well. And what happened, as lo and behold, is the government felt that there was going to be some litigation by the Casino Corporation, which in fact would hold it responsible for $178 million of casino debt if in fact it did not if it affected the revenues of the casino. Mr. Speaker, the minister continues to say, well, this is just a measure put in there in the event that we would have to use it. We're hoping that we don't have to use that, Mr. Chairman, but by the same token, if it's there and we want to have the opportunity to leverage that, then we can leverage that piece of legislation and make sure that it gives us a 30-day opportunity to protect the interests of the government of Nova Scotia. I don't think that was necessary, because this government does have the legislative power to introduce legislation that may, from time to time, have effect upon its citizens and upon its businesses in such a way that it protects everyone. And the non-smoking legislation was, in fact, Mr. Chairman, a piece of legislation that affected all Nova Scotians. It affected their health, it affected their well-being. And surely, Mr. Chairman, we all can agree that if, in fact, we restrict the smoking habits of Nova Scotians, that some 15 years down the road will translate into a reduced health care expense in this province. Mr. Speaker, I don't know how many citizens. Mr. Chairman, through me, yes, don't take the rabbit foot. And I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, that is one way to reduce the cost. It's simply by looking after the health and the well-being of Nova Scotians. And I can tell you, all we have to do is take a walk through a palliative care unit of any hospital in this province, and we can certainly see the evidence of what the causes and effect of smoking has upon its citizens. One way to continue to reduce that debt, and there are other illnesses as a result of the chemical inhalations of smokers that, in fact, Mr. Speaker, affect the individual. Not just the cancers of it, but there's the asthma and so on and so forth, which are ongoing long-term costs that continue to escalate. And who bears the brunt of this, Mr. Chairman? The people who bear the brunt of this are the taxpayers of Nova Scotia. And I think that the minister is very much aware that Nova Scotians are attuned to living in a healthier environment and making sure that they are healthier citizens. And in order to do that, they need, from time to time, direction from government, and government needs to, from time to time, introduce legislation that is beneficial to society as a whole. It's much the same, Mr. Chairman, as we make sure that people simply don't drive through intersections and so on by putting signalized intersections there. We make sure we save the lives of those individuals. We make sure that we have penalties and fines for individuals that are speeding and so on, because we protect their interests and their safety. We make sure that people have safety and protection with respect to the use of firearms and everything. Mr. Speaker, all that is there for a purpose, and that's why government introduces legislation. Government introduces legislation, Mr. Chairman, to protect its citizens. And I see nothing wrong with the municipal government of the Halifax Regional Municipality introducing legislation that it feels is going to protect the health and well-being of its citizens. There has been some talk with respect to Casino Centre 200 in Sydney, which is the other casino, and that there was a total ban in smoking. However, that's not correct. There was a proportional ban in smoking at the Centre 200 Casino in Sydney, and the total ban won't come into effect until July of this year. So certainly, I certainly think that there is some monitoring. There's been monitoring done out there with respect to what kind of an impact this has on business. There's been some monitoring out there with respect to the number of people who frequent establishments and so on as a result of the ban on smoking, particularly in public places, Mr. Chairman. And I would say to you, Mr. Chairman, that much of the evidence is consistent here as it's consistent nationally and internationally, is that there is a decline initially, but the decline is only for a short period of time where people don't frequent establishments. But they eventually come back, and they eventually partake, and they eventually continue on with their sources of entertainment and activity. I can tell you, that, Mr. Chairman, there's nothing more healthier than sitting at a restaurant, be it the casino center down here or elsewhere, and having a nice meal without having to taste or smell cigarette smoke while you're enjoying an evening out. I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, many Nova Scotians, as a matter of fact, we don't have to tell you, CRA's reports say that the majority of Nova Scotians certainly want to be responsible, and they certainly want to make sure that they're able to be participants of a healthy Nova Scotia society. As well, Mr. Chairman, I know that that I've often talked about another piece of legislation that isn't even budgeted for in this item, and that was seatbelt legislation. And as a matter of fact, the Minister of Transportation could have very well put in his budget money which would have been reflected in the Financial Measures Act, or even the speech of a throne saying that the government was going to study or look at the logic of introducing legislation that would ban handheld phones. That in fact, that would have been a good piece of legislation for this government to introduce in the Financial Measures Act, even if it were for a pilot project for a couple of years, simply to gradually phase in Nova Scotians' need to be open and receptive to a protection and a safety measure as well. It's not a matter of legislating Nova Scotians to death and restricting Nova Scotians' ability to do things freely, but what we do with legislation, Mr. Chairman, and frequently that's simply why I'm a part of the Legislative Assembly anyway, is that we indeed make sure that we protect the interests of Nova Scotians whenever we possibly can. Mr. Chairman, I know that this has been approximately my 5th time standing in the Legislative Assembly speaking on Bill 36, and I want to say once again that if we would not have defeated the motion to hoist this bill, then we would have had a 6 months opportunity to take this financial measures bill, Bill 36, out to the constituencies in which those 31 members on the other side of the floor, Mr. Chairman, represent. And we could have, and I certainly would have, visited some of those constituencies and listened to Nova Scotians speak to them about the financial measures bill and how they felt about the meting out of the $155, and if in fact there were other needs that or Nova Scotians could have seen a better use of their dollars. Mr. Chairman, it's most important to recognize that in fact that we need to know that Nova Scotians are all going to benefit across this province from a province that states that its deficit has been reduced and that it has a surplus. One good thing about, if in fact we do have a surplus, Mr. Chairman, it's important to make sure, once again, as I've stated earlier, that we all benefit from the spoils of this province, and not just simply those in Nova Scotians who, well, or the government feels will elect them. I know that in my constituency office, a number of people come and they ask me if, in fact, they will receive the benefit of, or they will receive a $155 check in the mail. And some of those individuals, of course, come to the office to have their income tax done and so on. And a number of income taxes are done through the office, and they're done at the graces of the office by experienced individuals whom, in fact, provide that service to them. And many of those individuals know by looking at the bottom line of their income tax that they will not be receiving the $155 check in the mail. And they often reflect the disappointment of this. Mr. Chairman, there's also what people have to recognize as well is that, there's, and I believe my colleague from Cole Harbour Eastern Passage has alluded to the increase of some $200 million in user fees. And I'm not going to identify or name the number of user fees because it certainly is a list yea long. I'll leave that to other individuals who will choose to speak after I've finished. But some additional $200 million during this term of government has been levied on the Nova Scotians, whom in fact are paying some $68 million back, all for that $155 check. And that's some $200 million of fees have actually, Mr. Chairman, have been collected from this government for the last 2 years. So we could very well say that close to at least $500 million might have very well been realized during this government's term in office with respect to revenue coming through as a result of user fees. Mr. Chairman, I would say that we can stand here and the government can boast about what its platform was, and that in fact it had a plan for Nova Scotians, and that it agreed that it would live by that plan. But this government has to recognize that not all those promises in that Tory Blue Book have been lived up to. Not many of those provinces are not lived up to, Mr. Speaker. I believe there's some 147 promises, or maybe there was 247. 247 promises, Mr. Speaker, and another 13 that didn't even make the Tory Blue Book, and they're going out there, and they will stand on their platform, and we will watch them fall by the wayside one by one by one, because Nova Scotians will know that in fact they have not lived up to serving all Nova Scotians, which a government is expected to do. Mr. Chairman, having said that, I think I will now take my seat and pass it on to some other member who wishes to speak on the Financial Measures Act.
Well done, no jury.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And in regards of the comments that are going on, I've been listening with great interest to the opposition members talking about the principle of the bill. And I'm listening to the New Democratic Party talk about the fact that they think that this tax provisions in this bill are wrong. And I remember I heard the member from Eastern Passage some time ago, and they also said unfair, and the member from Halifax Fairview said that. And I remember I took a note about what the member for Dartmouth North was saying. He says there's a difference, and he says the difference between this party and the government, and he says this is unfair, and he made mention that not all Nova Scotians will get this. And I find that comment very interesting, because I can assure the people of Nova Scotia that if we wouldn't have done the tax reduction, that where we would give people who pay income taxes reduction in this budget, if we somehow had changed that and modified it in some other way, I can bet you my bottom dollar that the New Democratic Party would have said, that, they promised one thing, but they did something else. And I'm also sure that the Liberal Party would have done that, because even when we do our promises, they keep trying to say that we haven't. Now, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, in regards of the Financial Measures Act, it is a bill which brings about changes in an act, which basically put in action what the budget has put in place. Now, obviously, there are many things in the budget that don't require an act to bring about. The spending requirements for each department have been passed in the estimates, and that was already been done. But there are things in here which require some changes, and I'll give you a good example, one of which, of course, is the provisions whereby that we will be reducing taxes. And that reduction is in two forms, one of which is going to be a change in each of the brackets that Nova Scotia pays taxes on. And income tax is a progressive tax. The more you make, the higher the brackets you will touch, and each bracket has a higher tax rate, so those who are able to pay more do pay more. So that change is in there. But there is another change in this bill that we're very proud of, that the opposition has spoken at length against, and that's about the fact that we will be giving Nova Scotians a rebate check of $155. Now, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chairman, we are very proud of the changes that we have brought about, and there are those who will disagree that we shouldn't be giving income tax relief at all. There are those who say that it's not enough, and there's a variety of opinion. And I learned one thing in political arena, if you could call this hollowed establishment an arena, because in a sense it is. But stand in your convictions, make decisions that you think are right, and be prepared to defend them. And we are. And the opposition will speak at great length about everything that the government does is wrong. And even when they say that they do something right, there's always a caveat. It's always, well, albeit, they have put money in health care, but they really should have put more. They have put more money in education, but they should have done more. Now, the difference, and I'll go back to the member for Dartmouth North, and the thing that he mentioned, and also the member for Dartmouth Eastern Passage was mentioning, was that we should be spending. Is it Cole Harbour Eastern Passage?
Yeah, whatever though.
Whatever it is. Yeah. Anyway, I could mention my name, but I would be out of order if I do that. But
Graham Steele told you that.
There we go. No, I mean the member was my name. Oh. But to go back to the fact that it said there was a difference in philosophy, and there is. Because the New Democratic Party, and the fact is that you spoke before, I'll turn to the Liberal Party in a few minutes, but is that you're saying, to a great extent, if I listen to the debates that took place in this House, is that, income tax relief is not really of an importance. That what you'd like to do is you'd like to spend more on different programs. And, if we want to look through Hansard, most of the things that you're saying is that, well, the income tax relief, in your opinion, will go mostly to the rich and none of the poor. So in essence, what we should be doing is we should be spending that on programs. And then you say those in need are the people that should be receiving relief. Well, the big question that you're looking at is, why are we giving income tax relief? Why did we make the commitment 4 years ago? And it was all about being competitive. It was all about growing our economy. Now, over the last 4 years, has Nova Scotia's economy grown? And the answer is yes. Everyone in this House has to agree that it has. And we've done better than our private forecasters. And that's something that I think that we're all thankful for, whatever political strike that you are. So, so the question is, why do we offer that? Well, it's all about being competitive. And every province in Canada, with the exception of one, has given income tax relief over the last 4 years. And that one province that had not given it was Nova Scotia. And you may say, why didn't we? Well, let's put it in perspective. We didn't give income tax relief because of the fact that we had a sizable deficit. And when I first tabled the budget in this House, it showed a deficit of $498 million. And the fact is that we had told Nova Scotians that within 3 years that we would balance the budget. And we did so, and again, this year we tabled another balanced budget. Now, the commitment that we made said that we would give income tax relief, and we have done it in two forms, as I mentioned earlier in my comments, one of which is a taxpayer refund directly to Nova Scotians of $155, which will go to approximately 438,000 Nova Scotians. And the other part of it is a change in the tax rates. Now, we believe that this is a good thing for Nova Scotia, that it'll continue to grow the economy. Now, I've mentioned before that the priorities of the New Democratic Party is that they felt that it should come in another form, and that it shouldn't be based on income tax, it should be based on need. In essence, that's what they've said. So, Mr. Speaker, I find it amazing that the Liberal Party is saying that we're filibustering a bill. And when we stood in this House today, it was 13 hours that both parties had talked about on the principle of the bill. And they had yet to bring forward any amendments at that point in time, and it became very obvious that their intention was to use the 20 hours. So, if that is the case, Mr. Speaker, then we will exercise our opportunity as an elected member of this House to speak on the principle of the bill, and that is what we are doing. Now, to turn to the Liberal Party. You know, this is a party that 2 years ago, the member from Clare and many members there were saying that we should be giving tax relief because the federal government had lowered its rates, and we should be accommodating the reduction in provincial rates at the same time. And the member from Clare has to nod his head because we read answer to him, and he said it, and so did the finance critic of that party, Mr. Don Down, who was the member for Lunenburg West. Now, you know, the Liberal Party at that time was saying that we should reduce taxes when we had a deficit. Now today they are reborn, because today they have a new leader. And the new leader is saying, now that we have a surplus, we shouldn't give tax relief. You know what I mean? I find it hard to follow a pattern here, because the pattern somehow has broken. And so the member for Dartmouth East is saying the pattern is barring. Well, 2 years ago, they didn't have any problem back then, Mr. Speaker, and so all of a sudden they have a problem now. So there are many people that say, why is there a difference? Well, there are people that say the difference could be that there's an election. And the fact of the matter is that their leader couldn't stand up and support something that the Conservatives have done. There are people who use that as an observation. The fact of the matter is, I don't know why he's taking that position, but he's taking many different positions. And, you know, I know that it's difficult being a new leader, and I know that it's a learning curve, and I know there's a honeymoon. Well, you know, the honeymoon came to a crashing end, especially during a 2-week period about 2 or 3 months ago, when basically he changed his position within, I don't know how many times, about 4 or 5 times within a week, and that differed from the ones he had before. So, you know, the fact of the matter is that I know they're upset, and I know they want me to sit down, because the fact of the matter is when you speak the truth, they don't like to hear it. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, we said what we would do, when we would do it, and we have. Now, you know, they may not agree with the taxpayer refund, and that's their opinion. They may not agree with the changes in reduction to income tax, and that is their opinion. It is not the opinion that this government holds, and the fact of the matter is that we are prepared to defend the income tax reductions that we have put in place. They may feel that the economy and its growth is not that important. We do not share that opinion. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we have made some investments in the budget that I tabled in April that talked about capital investments that we were going to make. And the fact of the matter is we said that we would make some investments in roads. And when did we say that? We said it 4 years ago when we went to the polls. We told Nova Scotians what we would do. In this budget, there was also, Mr. Chairman, there was also in this budget, Mr. Chairman, there were also provisions here for capital spending in schools and in hospitals and some of our public works. A total of $250 million in this budget, Mr. Chairman. The fact of the matter is that those are requirements that we feel that will help keep the economy growing, but that will serve many of our people who have requirements. Many, Mr. Speaker, many of the schools that the same party, the Liberal Party, is saying, getting up in question period and asking us to repair, many of the schools that they're saying have to be replaced, they're asking this government to spend money on. But their leader is outside this House saying that no matter what happens, he will not add a dime to the debt. How in God's name, I almost said something else, Mr. Chairman, I didn't say it, how he would ever accomplish that is first of all, the press doesn't believe him. No one believes him when he says that. And then he tells Nova Scotians that he would still build the same schools and he would increase spending on highways. Now, this is going to be a bit of a stretch. At the same time, he's saying that he will remove he will revoke the reductions in income tax that we have put in place in this budget. Now, how he's going to do those changes, Mr. Speaker, and also continue to keep Nova Scotia competitive in the tax environment in Atlantic Canada is the question. Now, you could say, well, why am I outlining the Liberal Party's platform? Well, first of all, I got to make sure I got the right one, because I'm not sure which week I looked at the website. But if he had one, Mr. Speaker, it'll be interesting to show whether or not he understands how the economy works and what generates economic growth. And it shows basically a lack of that. Now, in this budget, Mr. Speaker, we have made changes to income tax policy, which I think are to the good of the province. And I should point out, people say, well, are you only doing this because of the fact that you made the commitment 4 years ago? And I've stated in this House on my feet, as has the Premier, that even if we hadn't made the commitment, that we would still give income tax relief in this budget. I said that before, and I say it again. But it goes back to the point that we think it's important in a business environment that we remain competitive. And others may not share that opinion, and so be it. We will defend our decisions as they are put forward. But even when we say that, in this budget, where do we invest on the spending side of it? And I think that we should point out that even that we are giving income tax relief, we have made investments in health to the tune of $140 million. We have made investments in our education system to the tune of $55 million. We have made investments in almost all of our line departments, community services, I can go tourism. We have justice increases in there also, Mr. Speaker. So the fact of the matter is that we have met the demands that are there. Are there demands over and above that? Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, the answer, of course, is yes. And even today, in question period, the New Democratic Party was saying that there are demands within the district health authorities, and that if we were to meet all those demands, that we would have a deficit in our DHAs. And I can tell you, there's a wish list of DHAs that is extensive. And the fact of the matter is, there was a wish list every year, and no matter how much money that we will give to district health authorities, people want to. A lot of those health authorities would like to even expand services over and above that. And the members opposite are talking about a $40 million deficit. Mr. Speaker, that is ridiculous. The fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, when we finalize the business plans for them, they will live within the budget that we have set out. Now, the fact is, Mr. Speaker, I will point out that district health authorities do have ambitious plans. And the fact, I know that they're trying to serve the population, and they always will probably have, the list will probably be endless. But I should point out that we also, at the same time, have to live within a budget, and a $140 million increase in a year is not an insignificant investment for our province to be making. Now, Mr. Speaker, in this budget, I look at some of the things, especially that we've invested, whether or not it's putting money into my colleague, the Minister of Health, even in legal aid, which there was a requirement that we felt that the federal government should be investing. That money wasn't forthcoming, so we basically have made the investments to ensure that people have access to legal services, because those in need to have it. And you talk about people in need. There are those who say that you shouldn't make these changes to income tax, and that we should be giving them to those who are in need. And I go back to the comment that I made before about growing the economy. The best thing that we could do as a government for those people who are in need is to grow the economy. Because, government doesn't get its revenues from nowhere. And the majority of our revenues are coming from Nova Scotians, whether or not it's citizens or corporations. And that speaks well, because we're becoming less and less dependent on our federal government. Over the last 4 or 5 years, the percentage of our revenues which are attributable to the federal government have gone down. And the fact of the matter is, as much as I would like to keep our federal revenues going up so that we would have even more revenues, it shows that we're less dependent on our federal government, and I think that's something that bodes well for our province, Mr. Speaker. Now, well, I find it amazing, Mr. Speaker, because I listened to the member for Cape Breton South, and I'm sure that he'll get on his feet and speak about the budget, because we always welcome his comments. And I always find it amazing that when we listen to the situation there, that when we talked about some of the decisions that we made and some of the things that we talked about making tough decisions such as selling Nova Scotia Resources Limited, that member opposite said that we shouldn't sell it. Now today, he's preoccupied about the debt. He's saying we're concerned about the debt, but you shouldn't have sold NSRL. You shouldn't have received $400 million for it, and you should be investing $40, $50 million in every well that you invest into. That is the plan of the Liberal Party. Now that doesn't make any sense. How can you credibly stand up or even make comments across the floor and say that? It shows a basic lack of understanding about how government does that. Now, we got out of that, Mr. Chairman, because for one reason. It limited the exposure to the province, and we got good money for our investment. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we made some difficult decisions in areas that even that member represents, and that was in Cape Breton. And we made some difficult decisions getting out of industries that we had no business being into. And that's like the steel-making business, Mr. Speaker. Over the last 20 years or 30 years, we have tried, and over time, it became more than apparent that our place was not in that industry. So we made some difficult decisions. We treated the workers with respect, but we moved on. But the other thing we did we also made some investments in the area, and we've made many investments in the area, especially in regards of a lot of the call centers, and many people in Cape Breton who have never had a full-time position, Mr. Speaker, now have so, and I believe that brings dignity to those people. But it also brings up, I would give a sense of enthusiasm to that area. And though the members opposite, when they speak of Cape Breton, it is always gloom. Mr. Chairman, I believe there are many positive things that are going there. And the only thing perhaps holding back Cape Breton is the opposition, in the sense that all they talk about is a negative. There are many positives going on in that area, Mr. Chairman. And the member up from Cape Breton Centre says that he feels that everything is negative in Cape Breton, and I disagree with that. And we may agree to disagree on that. But the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, I think overall that there are more people working in this province today than any time in our history. And our province and our government is very proud of that. Now, the Liberal Party may not feel that that is positive, but the fact of the matter is it is. Which one was that? Well, he'll probably get up on his feet and correct me if I've said something outside of it. So, anyway, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to be wrapping up my comments in a couple of minutes, but I want to go back to the point that the majority of this bill that the Financial Measures Act is about income tax relief. When I tabled the budget, I said there will be debate in this House over this issue, and I know the opposition hasn't disappointed me. The fact is that, I knew they would not agree with what the government is proposing, and in fact, many times in government and politics, people disagree just to disagree. But we believe in the principles that we have espoused in this budget. We believe that it will help keep the economy growing. It'll give dignity to people that work and have a job, and that's why we put money and income tax relief into the hands of our working Nova Scotians. That's what this budget does. That's what this act does. And I would ask the opposition to at least consider those points when they go to choose to vote on this bill, and hopefully they'll support it. I don't hold my breath I won't be holding my breath in that regard, but you never know. There might be a convert. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
A member for Halifax, Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm disappointed a little, Mr. Speaker, that after some, what are we at now, 15 hours of debate on this bill, the Minister of Finance still doesn't get it. So I think I'm going to take most of the time available to me to go over one more time for the Minister's benefit what's really going on here. Now, the Minister says that he's there to tell the truth, but unfortunately the whole Tory position is based on illusion. So I'm going to go over again as concisely as I can and perhaps as slowly as I can what the illusions are on which this Financial Measures Act is based. And of course the first and most prominent one is the Tory line, which I guess their polls are telling them is what they should say, and that is that, well, they've abandoned the position that prosperity is just around the corner. Now they say, well, prosperity is here. And that's why laughing, happy Nova Scotians will trip to the polls and vote Tory because they're all feeling so prosperous. I'd like to read, Mr. Chairman, if I might, an email I received a little while ago. Because I say to people, you know, unlike the Minister of Finance who likes to take what we say and twist it around and say, aha, that's what the NDP is really saying, I try and put the government's position to my constituents and others and say, okay, this is what the government's saying. What's your response to that? And this is an email I received from a person to whom I said, but the government says prosperity is here. Is this enough to get you to vote for the Conservative Party? And this is what she said. She said, quote, "You are mistaken. We are not happy, do not feel prosperous. My grocery bills are climbing all the time. Tax on things I really need. My aunt, who was on a pension, could not afford to get a prescription filled as it was not covered. I helped her out, but then I pay for allergy pills and pay taxes on them. They cost me over $1 a pill." She goes on to say, Mr. Chairman, quote, "The school had no water yesterday. The drainage tiles are not working properly. However, the school has no money for things like this. There's a school trip coming. There are families that cannot afford it. It costs $32. The electric bills are going up. My car insurance is up. Gas is up. Groceries is up. Home heating. Clothe a teenager. It's all too much. The schools need you to send money as they cannot afford all the programs. You hear it all at the grocery store lineups, at the school meetings, at the doctor offices. No, Graham, people are not happy. We are fed up of being nickel and dime to death." End of quote. Now that is the response of a Nova Scotian when I said to her, but the Tories are saying that prosperity is here. That's more like how Nova Scotians are really feeling. Now, I like to tell the truth to the members on the other side, even though, as the saying goes, even though the heavens fall, even though the members on that side don't like to hear it. Last time I got up to speak on the Financial Measures Act, a few days later, there was a few-day lag time, I'm not quite sure why. The member for Pictou East proposed a resolution. The member for Halifax Bedford Basin proposed a resolution. It's one of the rare times that we hear either of them actually speak in this House, and they were criticizing me for the facts that I had laid out. But I noted that they didn't actually disagree with any of the figures that I had laid out. They simply stated others of their own. Because what's happening here, part of the illusion is that the Tories are laying out facts and figures to buttress the Financial Measures Act and the other parts of their budget and say, this is all we want Nova Scotians to believe. Now, I'm not here to be an apostle of doom or messenger of bad news, but I do believe in telling the whole story. I do believe in saying, here's what's going right, here's what's not going so right. But I'm not going to go over all those figures again, although I may go over some of them since so clearly it's not sinking into the Minister of Finance as he talks about the Financial Measures Act. But there's another figure that I think may come as a surprise to the members on that side of the House, may even come as a surprise to the Minister of Economic Development, who delivered the Blue Book Mark II today in the legislature. And I'll get into this later, Mr. Chairman. This book, which whole portions of this, I'm sure, are going to be lifted out and put in the Tory platform in the next election. They're that close to being fiction. But the minister and the members on that side like to talk about the rosy employment prospects that Nova Scotians have, that more Nova Scotians are working than ever before. But here's a fact that I'm sure the members on that side don't realize. So I have a test. I have a test for the members on that side, and see who is the first member on that side to get the correct answer. It's a very simple question, and here's the prize. Here's the prize, a shiny loonie, for the first member on that side who guesses the correct answer.
Order, please. The member knows you're not allowed to use props in the House, so I would ask you to put the loonie in your pocket or on your desk. Well, it's in the member, in the spirit of the evening, we'll allow that. You have the floor.
Okay. Now, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your indulgence, but a coin, after all, is just a document in a slightly different form than usual. It is printed, and it's printed on metal, and it's just a different kind of document. Now, here's the question. I'm going to enlist the aid of the member for Halifax Needham and the member for Sackville-Cobequid to help me spot the person who gets the correct answer. The question is this: is the unemployment rate in Nova Scotia today higher or lower than it was the month that this government came into office? Oh, no, it's got to be a member on that side. Is the unemployment rate higher or lower today than it was the month this government came into office? Who knows? Anybody? What's the answer? Member for Sackville-Cobequid, do you know the answer?
I'd like to recognize the member from Sackville-Cobequid, and this would be on a point of order, not to answer that specific question. This is on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
You have
the point is that I know what the answer is, and it's not lower, but I'm wondering, Mr. Chair, what order I can use to tell them that it's not lower?
Now, member, the experience that you have in this House, you know that that's not a point of order, but thank you. Halifax Fairview has the floor.
Thank you. I'm actually surprised, Mr. Chairman, that for a crowd that loves to quote the statistics that they want to cite, or for the member for Pictou to pass a critical resolution, or the member for Halifax Bedford Basin who wanted to pass a critical resolution, that not one single member on that side of the House knew the correct answer. And the correct answer, of course, Mr. Chairman, as a member, I knew the member for Sackville-Cobequid would know, but the unemployment rate today is, as compared to what it was when this crowd came into office, is higher. Did they know that? Are they telling Nova Scotians that when they say that the Nova Scotians are feeling more prosperous? The unemployment rate today is higher than it was
Order, please.
in August 1999.
Order, please. I'd like to recognize the member from Sackville-Beaverbank on a point of order or a question.
A point of order,
On a point
Mr.
of order.
Chairman. The honourable member for Fairview wants the answer, and the answer is there are 26,000 more Nova Scotians working today in Nova Scotia than in 1999.
Thank you for your answer. As chair, I have to rule on that point of order. It was not a point of order. It may be considered information, but I will recognize the member from Halifax Fairview.
And just so the members on that side understand that what I'm saying is true, I'm going to table two documents, one showing what the unemployment rate was back then and another showing what it is now. And in case they're wondering if I'm making up these numbers, both of them say up in the top corner, Nova Scotia Department of Finance. It's directly comparable because in both cases it's a seasonally adjusted unemployment rate. So there you have it, Mr. Speaker. Under this government, unemployment has gone up. Now, what's going on here? How can that be? How can more people be employed and yet the unemployment rate be higher?
Order, please. I'd like to recognize the member from Colchester North on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if the member opposite would look at last week's Halifax Herald, he would see that the unemployment rate for Nova Scotia was 8.6%. 7% in Halifax, which is lower than Vancouver, lower than Toronto, lower than Montreal. This is the lowest rate of unemployment in several decades in Nova Scotia, and the member knows that. Thank you.
Once again, as chair, I have to rule on that. That is not a point of order, but information supplied to the member across the floor, and he has the floor. Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, because of course that's in fact not true. If the member would care to table the documents that back up his assertion, he's welcome to do so. It's not the lowest unemployment rate Nova Scotia has seen in decades. In fact, unemployment in Nova Scotia was lower the month that this crowd came into office. I've tabled the documents. If anybody on that side wants to show me that it's not true, then they're welcome to table those documents.
Order, please. I'd like to recognize the member from Cape Breton North on a point of order.
Yes, it is a point of order, and in examining the documentation that the member from Fairview presented, Mr. Speaker, if he's going to present statistics in the House, could he at least be consistent that the actual statistics are apples to apples rather than oranges to lemons, which they present? Because the statistics here that he refers to are not consistent. He has 1999 data here. This data starts in April 2002 to April 2003. But what the member doesn't get, Mr. Chair, is that the size of the labor force in the province is growing. The number of employed Nova Scotians is now at 436,300 individuals, a record number in this province. The economy is growing. Therefore, the number of entrants in this economy are there as well. Let's talk statistics. I'll table any statistic he wants, Mr. Chair, because this province is moving forward.
Order, please. Once again, the chair will have to rule that that was not a point of order, but some facts that have been supplied to the House. And now I would like to recognize the member from Sackville-Cobequid, I hope on a point of order, as an example to what a point of order should be for the House with his experience.
Oh, yes. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And, you know, sometimes, you know, experience, you learn lessons from watching those like the government House leader, even more experienced than I. And so therefore, sometimes one follows his examples. And so hopefully this will be a point. And Mr. Chair, what I want to point out to the member who just spoke, of course, that even if you do have more people working and the labor force is larger and a larger percentage of that labor force is unemployed, your unemployment rate goes up, as it has here in Nova Scotia. And, Mr. Chair, the minister responsible for economic development, you would think, would be more concerned about trying to create employment for those people than trying to prove the statistics.
Order, please. Oh. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. I have to also rule on that. Certainly not a point of order, but the member did have an opportunity to share his point. I would like to recognize the member from Halifax, Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because of course the link between those two facts that at first glance appear to be a bit incongruous are, of course, the participation rate, which in Nova Scotia is still abysmally low. And, of course, I beg to differ from the minister. He knows after looking at the documents those two numbers are directly comparable. I mean, we're comparing, I asked him to compare the rate today with the month they came into office. Mr. Chairman, I don't know what that member is going on about. If I were that member, and I'm not, but if I were the member for Cape Breton North, a figure that I think I would be a lot more concerned about is the participation rate in Cape Breton. Now, the participation rate is a figure that doesn't get talked about very much, but is actually very, very important as a way of explaining what's really going on in the labor market. Because what it is the percentage. Just wondering if you were going to.
No, carry on. You have the floor. You have the floor.
Mr. Chairman, what it is the percentage of the adult labor force that is actually either working or looking for work. Now, in a healthy, growing, prosperous economy, that rate would be up around 70% or higher. But in Cape Breton, where that member comes from, who I fondly like to refer to as Old Yeller, because he doesn't seem to be able to get up without yelling, the participation rate is one of the lowest in Canada. One of the lowest in Canada, and the latest figures show that the participation rate in Cape Breton is... I see the chairman laughing, and I'm just wondering why.
I think it was your Old Yeller comment.
Order. The member, order, please. Order, please. We're getting a little out of control here this evening, and I would like to call order to the chamber. The member from Halifax, Fairview, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The participation rate in Cape Breton is 50.8%, which is one of the lowest in all of Canada. That means that of the entire adult population, only one half, are working or looking for work. The other half are so discouraged by the job market that they've simply given up. They've simply given up. One half, you walk down a street in Sydney, Glace Bay, North Sydney, Sydney Mines, New Waterford, and on average, every second person, every second adult you walk past has given up looking for work. Now, I don't know how that member is going to knock on the doorsteps knock on the doors of his riding and tell people in an area where the participation rate is 50% that prosperity is here. Now, if he can sell that, well, I say good for him. He's a better salesman than I am. And all I'm saying to that member, who has his own favorite statistics that he likes to cite, is I understand the statistics the government's citing. I just want the government to start talking about the whole picture, the whole story, which includes a 50% participation rate in Cape Breton. That I want to hear them say that and acknowledge that not everybody in Nova Scotia is feeling prosperous right now. I want them to acknowledge that the 300,000 adult Nova Scotians who are not going to get that $155 check that's provided for by the Financial Measures Act, that those people are not going to be happy. Now, the Minister of Finance says that, well, the line that I guess we hear it enough, so it must be coming from their polling. Well, that's...
I would like to recognize the Deputy Speaker on a point of order.
Mr. Chairman, I've listened here for some time to the honourable member of Gloom and Doom, and I would like to say that although I'm not as familiar with Cape Breton as members from Cape Breton, I will tell you that this government committed $12 million towards revitalizing Cape Breton's economy through the Cape Breton Growth Fund. Members from Cape Breton know that and appreciate that and respect that. We have helped to secure infrastructure, critical Cape Breton infrastructure through Cape Breton Rail, or Clickety-Clark, some people refer to it as. Mr. Chairman, we are investing up to $15 million to support the expansion of Stora, a big employer, the major employer in Cape Breton, $15 million to Stora. And that member from Halifax Fairview, the member of Gloom and Doom, should take a look at the investments that this government has taken to put Cape Breton back where it should be on the growth, and as people can experience some employment growth. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I would like to recognize the member from Halifax Fairview.
Thank you. Well, I guess the member for Cape Breton North has a new volunteer in his campaign. The member for Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley is going to go knocking on doors with him in Cape Breton North and tell people, even if they don't believe it, that they're prosperous, and see if they vote for the Tories. Now, you want to talk about a properly prosperous province, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, rather.
Order, please. I'd like to recognize the member and also the minister from Cape Breton North. And Minister, if you could just state the reason why you're standing.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify, and actually, in a point of order, Mr. Chair, sorry, I want a point of order.
Point of order.
And that is that member is welcome to come to Cape Breton North if he has the nerve to and stand on the ground, because in 2 short years, Cape Breton North has advanced more than when they had 8 years of representation from another government, and will continue to do so. And I'll be happy to get to the doorsteps in Cape Breton North, and I challenge him to come to Cape Breton North and go toe-to-toe with me.
Before I recognize the Halifax member from Halifax Fairview, maybe I should suggest that we should have a class tomorrow morning before we start on determining exactly what a point of order would be considered in this chair. But member, you do have the floor. Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I'm going to make the same offer to that minister that I made to his seatmate there, the member for Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley, the member who incidentally declined my kind offer. I will go up to Cape Breton North.
Order, please. I'd like to recognize Deputy Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, you understand the conditions of the point of order as well as some other honourable members, and most honourable members do. If you will look at the in both chain, the conditions relative to a point of order, they clearly point out that if another honourable member in the House says something that is absolutely an untruth about an honourable member, then they're required to stand on their feet and apologize. I accepted the challenge from the honourable member for Halifax Fairview to go into the food banks in his riding, but I asked him to come with me up to Mactera, up to some of the businesses in my riding that are making payroll taxes. Why won't he stand on his feet and accept the challenge? You know why? Because I said to you, Mr.
Order, please. Order, please. Order, just order. No, order, please. Order, please. Obviously, it's order, please. Obviously, it's not necessary for the member from Musquodoboit to come to class tomorrow morning. He certainly stated the reason of point of order. But before I recognize the member from Sackville-Cobequid, I would like to give the member from Cole Harbour Eastern Passage an opportunity for introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe to just take a break from the points of order, I wanted to introduce spurious points of order, I'm told by my colleague from Halifax Fairview. In the Western Gallery is my niece, Elise DeVoe from Port Hawkesbury. And if she could stand and receive the warm welcome of the House. And welcome her, and I'm glad to see her here.
Well, we're certainly pleased to have you with us here this evening. Order, please. Certainly pleased to have you with us here in the House, and would like to make it clear that you have a very fine uncle, indeed. And now I would like to recognize the member from Sackville-Cobequid.
Very much, Mr. Chair.
Point of order.
Yes, and I'm pleased
Are
that
you going to attend class tomorrow morning on the point of order, or are you clear on the point of order?
Who's going to give it?
We'll advise later on.
Oh. My point, Mr. Chair, is I was just wondering if the member from Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley was in fact challenging your ruling of before.
Thank you for that, but I didn't consider the member to be challenging the chair. The member has also a lot of experience with the position as chair, and I wouldn't think that member would challenge the chair. I would like to get back on track. We are certainly in committee tonight on the Financial Measures Act, Bill number 36, and the member from Halifax Fairview has the floor. Member, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I'm having trouble getting a complete sentence out tonight without them jumping up on points of order, Mr. Chairman. And so, as I was saying before I was so interrupted, the offer that I extend to the Minister of Economic Development, I'll go up to his riding, I'll knock on doors with him as long as he comes to my riding and works for an afternoon at the West End Ecumenical Food Bank and tells the people there how prosperous they really are. So we'll see if he accepts that offer. Now, if you want to talk about a province that's got something to brag about, let's look at, for example, Manitoba. Now, what's the unemployment rate in Manitoba? 4.3%. I mean, in this day and age, that is almost unbelievable. In a day and age when we've come to accept 7, 8, 9, 10% unemployment as normal, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta are showing how it can really be done. Now, obviously, Alberta is a different kind of case. They got a wealth of natural resources that explains a great deal about how their economy is going. And I don't think anybody will argue that it's because of the natural wealth of that province that they're doing so very well. But you can't say quite the same thing about Saskatchewan, which has about the same population as Nova Scotia, or Manitoba, which has a population only slightly larger. How is it? Is it the flat roads? How is it that that province has managed to generate an unemployment rate, an unbelievable unemployment rate of 4.3%? Now, if that government got the unemployment rate down to 4.3%, I'd vote for them myself, Mr. Chairman. But as long as unemployment is where it is, as long as poverty of all kinds is where it is, as long as there is so much need, as long as there are people this government is leaving behind, then I won't be content. I won't vote for this government. Because that's the bit that they're leaving out, is the people they're leaving behind. Well, Mr. Chairman, as I was preparing for the upcoming election, I went through a file of pamphlets from old campaigns, and I came across a Conservative pamphlet from 1998. It's not that long ago. It's only, for heaven's sake, it's only 5 years. But I thought it was very interesting and instructive to see what the Conservative candidate only 5 years ago was promising. as he went on the doorsteps of Halifax Fairview. This will all come back to the Financial Measures Act, Mr. Chairman. Don't worry. The gentleman whose name I probably won't say, I shouldn't say it out loud. I don't think it's fair to him. I think he's left the riding. In fact, the gentleman of this name has recently become a returning officer in the Annapolis Valley, but I haven't ascertained whether it's the same person or not. But at any rate, this is what the Tory member, heaven forbid Halifax Fairview should have a Tory member, the Tory candidate said in 1998. He promised that our children, actually it's spelled children, C-H-I-L-D-E-R-N, twice. Our children have access to the same level of education other children across Nova Scotia enjoy. Now, I assume, although it's not clear, that what he's referring to is the relative underfunding of the Halifax Regional School Board compared to the rest of the province. Has that changed since 1998? Since 1999 under a Conservative government? Certainly not. It's the same. That disparity is the same. Here's his second promise. Seniors are not charged for pharmacare. That was the promise of the Conservative candidate in 1998, not that it would be reduced, not that it would be frozen, or not, as this government has done, is slowed the rate of increase, which is nevertheless headed on an upward curve. He said seniors should not be charged for pharmacare. His third promise was to replace the costly HST with a fairer tax. So that only 5 years ago, a Conservative candidate knocked on doors in Halifax Fairview and said he was against the HST and wanted to replace it. Now, that brings me around, of course, to the Financial Measures Act, and specifically what I'm going to start talking about as I try and re-educate the Minister of Finance is this issue of the tax cut. Because I don't think the Minister of Finance heard me properly the last time I spoke about this, so I'm going to say it again. That part of the illusion on which the Financial Measures Act is based is that this was a tax cut budget. But it's not, because taxes are going up in every single category except personal income tax. Consumption taxes are going up, fuel taxes are going up, certainly gambling revenue is going up, tobacco taxes going up, corporate taxes are going up. All the range of taxes, they're all going up as a result of this budget. The government's take, if this budget is implemented, if we allow the Financial Measures Act to pass, is going to be more than they're giving back with the $155 checks. So at the end of the day, Nova Scotians are going to be paying more as a result of the budget. But the illusion the Tories are trying to spin is that this is all about tax cuts. Well, if it was all about tax cuts, how about cutting taxes? But you're not doing that. You're not cutting taxes. You're increasing taxes and then trying to make everybody talk about the one line, the one revenue line out of about 15 that's going down a little bit. When if you add everything up, Nova Scotians are going to be paying and paying and paying and paying. So if you're going to talk about that, if you want to talk about how prosperous Nova Scotians are, let's talk about this other illusion that they have, that this is going to stimulate the economy. Now, the representative of the Restaurant and Food Service Association came before Law Amendments and said this is going to stimulate his sector. And you know what, Mr. Chairman? It will. Because when people have ready cash, it's precisely that kind of place that they spend the money in. But that doesn't mean it's new money or found money or the government found it under a sofa somewhere and is giving it back to people. That's that much less money that they have to spend on other things, like, for example, fixing our schools. Or something I pulled off the internet from the Inverness Iran is fixing Orangedale's water supply. How about that? The board of directors has just resigned because they're fed up with provincial inaction and helping them fix their water supply, providing clean, safe water to the people of Orangedale. What's this government, what's the Financial Measures Act doing about that? Well, nothing. Because it's all based on an illusion that because one sector of the economy, principally the retail sector, is going to be stimulated, that has no effect anywhere else. The government's taking the money from other things and giving it back essentially to the retail sector. There's nothing wrong with that if you're in the retail sector, but if you're not in the retail sector, let's say you're a contractor who does plumbing, heating, ventilation for schools, well, there's that much less money for that sector. Now, if we're going to talk about this tax cut, the $155 tax cut spurring the economy, then we have to tell the whole story. The member for Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley says, well, now I'm the member for gloom and doom, but I'm not. I'm the member for telling the whole story. I like the good stuff, but you got to tell the whole story. Now, if a $40 million income tax cut is going to stimulate the economy and create jobs as the government claims, then what impact is the $70 million increase in corporate taxes going to have? You can't pretend that one item in the tax ledger is going to have a stimulative effect, and then another item on the other side of the ledger is going to have no effect. What is going to be the impact of the extra $70 million in corporate taxes this government's taking as a result of this budget, of which the Financial Measures Act is a part? What is the impact of that going to be? What is the impact going to be of the extra $74 million this government's taking in personal taxes? Yes, they're giving back some money in the form of the $155 tax refund.
Order, member. Would you permit an introduction?
Of course.
I'd like to recognize the member from Kings North on an introduction, please.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this opportunity. In the West Gallery, is that the West Gallery? In the West Gallery, a friend of mine, a school board member for Kings County, resident of Halls Harbor, is here to pay respects to the Savage family. Jenny White, I'd ask her to stand and be welcomed by the House.
Certainly would like to welcome you here this evening. Hope you're enjoying the proceedings. I'd like to recognize the member from Halifax Fairview.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd also like to know that if the $40 million personal income tax refund is going to stimulate the economy, what has been the effect of the well over $200 million this government has taken in new taxes and user fees just in the last couple of years? Because you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways, where taking money out has no impact and giving money back stimulates the economy and creates jobs. Because let's be very clear, this amount that's being given back is only a fraction, and a relatively small fraction, of the amount that this government has taken in new taxes and user fees since it took office. But I never hear them talk about that. I never hear them say that in the information they put out around the Financial Measures Act and the budget. So then let's move on to the $155 tax, because another illusion on which this Financial Measures Act is built is that the tax cut is fair. I know the Minister of Finance doesn't want to hear that. And when he was speaking, he took what we said and he twisted it around and said, well, what you're saying is this. And that wasn't, as a matter of fact, what we were saying. What we were saying is that if you're going to do tax relief, this is not the right way to do it. Because first of all the pain over the last 4 years has been through regressive taxes and user fees. The well over $200 million in new taxes and user fees have hit everybody equally, because they've gone in user fees, which everybody pays. If you're the richest Nova Scotian or the poorest, you pay the same user fee. HST is the classic example of the regressive tax, because when you buy something that is HST taxable, the richest Nova Scotian and the poorest Nova Scotian pay the same amount of tax. And as a proportion of income, it hits the low-income person a lot harder. So now that the time for relief has come, what does this government do? Does it give back the relief the same way they took it? No. This time they discover the income tax system, which is the one bit they've left alone, except they haven't really left it alone, but that's a whole other story about how they decoupled from the federal system and froze the bracket, so we have bracket creep, and they didn't pass through the federal tax cuts, so the decoupling actually amounted to a sneaky tax increase, but that's a whole other story for another day. What they did is that when it came time to give relief, is they rewarded the Nova Scotians who earn the most. And for the people who earn the least, who don't even earn enough to pay provincial income tax, they offer nothing. Now, I don't know what those members are going to say on the doorstep, because frankly, there's more people in Cape Breton North who are not going to get the check than in Halifax Fairview. I like to think of Halifax Fairview as hard-working Halifax Fairview. These are the people who are the engine of the economy. You're far more likely to find a school custodian than you are to find a school superintendent. You're far more likely to find a nurse, an LPN, a medical technologist than you are to find a surgeon. You're far more likely to find a paralegal or a legal courier than you are to find a judge. That's the kind of place Halifax Fairview is. These are the people, make no mistake about it, who keep Nova Scotia and HRM running. They're hardworking people, and there's more of them working than there are in Cape Breton North, or there are in Guysborough, Port Hawkesbury, or there are in Digby Annapolis, or Annapolis for that matter, or Shelburne County, or Yarmouth County. So let's reflect on this. I don't recall anybody saying this about the $155 check before, but a disproportionate amount of that refund is going to come to HRM. How about that? There's more people paying provincial income tax here, a higher percentage of the population in HRM pay income tax than do in the ridings that most of you represent over there. Have you reflected on that? That this is what this is taking money out of the government coffers and giving it disproportionately to HRM. Now, how are you going to explain that to the people at home after you finish telling them how prosperous they are? You know, the same is true for Colchester North or Inverness County. I could go down the list over there and say there's more people in my constituency going to get this check than there are in yours. Because on the economic ladder, my riding, hardworking Halifax Fairview, is relatively well off compared to the other ridings. So how are you going to explain this funneling of provincial income into HRM? How are you going to explain that to your people? How are you going to explain the fact that there are a disproportionate number of seniors in Argyll and many of your other ridings than there are in my riding? Because you know as well as I do that young people, working families, as the government likes to say, move to HRM to find work, leaving their parents, retired people back in the riding. And the people in Cape Breton know that. There's a disproportionate number of seniors back in the Cape Breton ridings. Now, when the Minister of Finance talks about working families, what's he leaving out? I guess that's what his polling tells him he's supposed to say. But let's just examine what he's leaving out when he talks about working families. What about retired people? Their working days are behind them. Their days of contributing to Nova Scotia's economy as members of the paid labor force are behind them. Many of them, of course, go into volunteer work and other kind of community service. But many of those people are not going to get this check because the minister excludes them from the group of working Nova Scotians. Well, how do you think the seniors feel about that? The ones in my riding aren't that happy, but if the member for Cape Breton North wants to go up to Cape Breton North and tell a senior in his riding how prosperous they are and that it's fair and right that they shouldn't get one of these checks after contributing their whole life to Nova Scotia's economy, well, good luck to him. If he can sell that to him, then he's a better salesman than I am, because I know that I couldn't sell it. 300,000 adult Nova Scotians will not get the $155. 300,000 angry Nova Scotians. Now, I've said it before and I'll say it again. My best advice to this government, and heaven knows, Mr. Chairman, I do my darndest to offer this government good advice. Sometimes they take it, usually they don't. But I told them that they really, really needed to go to the polls before these checks were in the mail. Because the 438,000 people, including me, including you, Mr. Chairman, including every member on that side of the House, every one of us who's going to get that $155 is going to say, well, it was mine anyway. I'm not exactly going to pat you in the back for giving it back to me. We're not going to vote Tory because they're sending us the $155 check. And I haven't, incidentally, Mr. Chairman, spoken to one single person who says that this check was going to change their minds about how they were going to vote. Mr. Chairman, so those people are going to say, well, it's my money anyway. Thanks for nothing. But it's the 300,000 people of working age who aren't going to get it. They're going to be angry because you can bet that out in Colchester North or Inverness or Hants West or Shelburne, people are going to take their check out of the mailbox and say to your neighbor, hey, did you get your check yet? And the 300,000 people are going to say in chorus, no, I haven't got mine yet. What check? And then they're going to call their MLA and say, where's my check? And that's when the members on that side of the House are going to have to explain why it is that they're not going to get a check and why that's fair. So you're going to face 438,000 people who say thanks for nothing and 300,000 people who are going to be really angry. They're going to be really angry, not at us, because it wasn't our idea. They're going to be angry at you. Now, for reasons best known to the Premier, I suspect, based on the Tory polling results, which we're told show the Tories heading in the wrong direction, but no doubt based on the polling results, the Premier said there won't be an election now in June. So I tried, Mr. Chairman. I did my best to give the government good advice and call the election for June, but they didn't take that advice, perhaps, well, most probably based on polling results. And so you all are going to have to deal with 300,000 angry people, and I just don't know what you're going to say to them. You're not a taxpayer? Is that what you're going to say to them? Because that's what the Minister of Finance says in here. Is he going to say to Argyll, okay, he's not running again. But is the Tory candidate in Argyll going to say, but you're not a taxpayer? And they're going to say, not a taxpayer? What are you talking about? I pay HST on everything I buy. I pay diesel tax. I might pay cigarette tax. I pay liquor tax. Tax, user fee. Just, I know my time's running out, Mr. Chairman, but I just wanted to say one thing in closing tonight. I have much more to say next time. I'm a very proud father of a 4.5-year-old who's going to be going to school in September. And I got the notice in the mail from the school saying when the orientation was, and this is where the parents need to be. And in the same letter, welcoming my child to school is an indication of how much money I have to bring to that meeting. How much I have to bring my checkbook to the meeting and write the first of what I'm sure are many, many, many checks to put my child through the public school system. That's the kind of thing that is driving people in Nova Scotia crazy. Nickel and dime and nickel and dime and nickel and dime and nickel and dime until they just can't take it anymore. Like getting a letter welcoming your child to school, telling you how much money to bring to the orientation meeting to pay for your child's education, and it's supposed to be a free education. I can afford it, but I know many people in my constituency who can't. And with that, Mr. Chairman, and I have so much more to say when we resume in Committee of the Whole, I would move that the committee adjourn.
Thank you. There's been a motion for the committee to adjourn. And hearing that, all in favor? Carried. I would like to recognize the Good Government House Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee to now rise and report very slow progress.
Chairman, on the Committee of the Whole House on Bills reports.
Committee's met and made progress and begs leave to set again.
Agreed. Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now rise to meet again on Tuesday at the hour of 00:01 a.m. and will sit until 23:59 p.m. on Tuesday. In other words, we will sit around the clock on Tuesday. The order of business, Mr. Speaker, following the daily routine and question period will be Committee of the Whole House on bills. And if we get through those bills, Mr. Speaker, we'll then move into third reading.
Motion is the House adjourn till 00:01 a.m. on Tuesday morning. That would be it. Be 12:01. Motion to adjourn then. Agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. House adjourned till Tuesday, a.m.